Hey everyone, what's going on? Yesterday I went to see Terminator Genisys on IMAX 3D. I was able to see it for free because I built up a lot of points on my scene card. This will be a spoiler review, mostly because I feel it's just easier to talk about the film, without having to worry about not giving away anything. Yeah, it's a hard film to talk about without getting into the nitty gritty. So if you haven't seen the film, don't listen to this. Go see it if you're planning to, or if you just don't really care about going to see the movie, then you can listen. Um, so my overall reaction is I kind of liked it more than I thought I was going to, or at least I mean, I didn't go in with I didn't go in dreading it, but my expectations weren't, like high, like with Mad Max or those kind of films that get really good reviews. Your expectations are pretty huge. With this, I was just like, okay, hopefully it'll be enjoyable in its own way. And I think it is. It's not a classic like the original two, particularly the first one. But I think it's a decent installment, and I do like how they did generally try to take it in a different direction. Unfortunately, this movie was spoiled a lot in the trailers, but even so, I did like how they tried to subvert the stuff from the original film and kind of have a little bit more fun tweaking the timeline. Because with something like Terminator 3, it had a really great ending, but the most part was pretty straightforward. But here, it keeps you on your toes a little bit more, especially if you haven't really watched the trailers or, yeah. Um, Again, there's a little bit more fun to it, in a way, because it's playing around with certain established things. So anyway, yeah, that's my initial that's my overall reaction to it. Now I'll get into more specific stuff. Um, I really like the beginning of the film when we see the future because the future that we see at the beginning of this film and John Connor feels more in line with the future stuff from the original two than Salvation did, especially with John Connor. With Salvation, it didn't feel like the John Connor in that was the sort of leader that we heard about in the original. For most of that movie, he's just a soldier, and we really didn't get that sense. What Kyle Reese told us in the first film, which is that he's the one that led us against the machines, that taught us how to fight. I think that's because of Terminator 3, things happen differently, so the future's a little bit different. But the future in this is more in line with the first two films. I think this movie is kind of ignoring 3 and 4. Uh, Particularly, yeah, I think it's pretty much ignoring 3 and 4. But yeah, at the beginning of this film, we see the John Connor that we heard about from the first one, the guy who led them to fight, led the humans to fight, led them to smash the machines. And we see, them finding the time displacement machine. We see the Terminator, the T-800, going back in time. Uh, we see John telling Kyle Reese the message that he gives to Sarah later on in the film, about, thank you, Sarah, for being there in the dark days. He tells Kyle she was a waitress, and Kyle was like, what was that? And, right, John Carr is like, all right, you want to know that. And I like the sort of scenes between Kyle and John. We see John saving Kyle when he was a boy, from a Terminator, and that sort of establishes their kind of relationship. That Kyle, feels a deep connection to John for saving him, and they have this nice little moment about what are you gonna do after this is finished, after they win the war. Because as you remember in the first one, we pretty much won the war, and sending the Terminator back was Skynet's last ditch effort to win. Um, so John and Kyle have a nice moment where it's like Kyle's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna find my parents' home, I'm gonna rebuild it, etc., etc. And John's like, nice beer would do, and it's a nice sort of human moment. Um, and yeah, so we see, and then Kyle Reese goes back, but before he goes back, something happens, and the timeline is changed. Matt Smith's character from the Doctor, the last Doctor from Doctor Who, attacks John Connor and says, "You didn't think it was going to be this simple, did you?" Um, and again, this is a spoiler review, so Matt Smith's character is eventually revealed to be the human embodiment of Skynet. And so I think through Matt Smith's character Skynet's through his actions, the timeline is changed, and some of that is a little bit confusing. But when Kyle Reese goes back, before it goes back, he has all these weird memories that he doesn't know where they come from, and he lands in 1984, same as he did in the original. Except in this 1984, Sarah Connor is already kind of the toughened, hardened badass she was kind of in Terminator 2. And she's been protected by this T-800 that she's called Pops that came to 1973, I believe. A T-1000 liquid metal Terminator was sent back to 1973, which is part of what I think that's part of the alter timeline of this film, and so she knows what happened, the events of the original film. Now she knows that Kyle Reese is supposed to be the one who fathers John. So yeah, so she actually takes out the T-800 from the original film after Arnold has, Arnold Schwarzenegger plays the Pops, and he basically fights himself, a younger version of himself that we saw in the original film. They have a brawl, and then Sarah shoots it in the heart, the heart, quote unquote, and then the T-800 is destroyed. And you don't you only see Sarah Connor's finger pulling the trigger and her perspective through the telescope, and that's a great moment where that's when everything kind of really swerves. The main villain of the original film is gone. More efficiently, more swiftly than he was in the original film. And that's what really sets this, Sarah apart. That establishes that, okay, this is the new Sarah Connor. This is kind of like Terminator 2 Sarah Connor, except kind of different. And then, of course, she meets up with Kyle, and that's sort of things go on from there. So yeah, and I really liked, even though I knew what the new sort of twist was going to be from the trailer, I still like seeing it played out. The future scene really in line with the future established in the original film. Judgment Day happens in 1997, which is kind of a nice throwback. I know it seems kind of quaint now, 1997, but it keeps in line with the original information. Um, again, seeing all that stuff we heard about played out um, was nice. Sometimes that doesn't work out in films, um, with like prequel films. But here it felt like it matched up for the most part. When we see them sending Kyle back and stuff. Uh, So yeah, and Jai Courtney plays Kyle Reese. Now Jai Courtney, I liked him here more than I have in other films. I think he's fine. I think the problem for me was that I wish they had gotten someone who looked more like Michael Biehn, who kind of sounded more like Michael Biehn. Jai Courtney, he never really reminded me of Kyle Reese from the original film, and well, it doesn't destroy the film. I wish there was a little bit more continuity between, the two actors. Because just physically, everything, yeah, it doesn't feel like he's the same guy. He doesn't feel like the guy who said, "I came across time for you, Sarah." The same kind of, urgency. It didn't seem to be there, especially when he's like, what day, what year. He kind of more of a throwaway line here than it was, in the original where, Kyle was like, "What day is it? What year?" It really establishes Kyle Reese's mindset. So yeah, Jai Courtney is okay in this film. Again, I liked him the most more here than anything else. But again, I just wish they may have found an actor who was more like Michael Biehn. I really liked Amelia Clarke. This is really her first, not her first film role, but probably her most major film role to date. And she's good here. I mean, she's not exactly like Linda Hamilton, but she's a little bit more close to Linda Hamilton than Jai Courtney is to Kyle Reese. And their chemistry is okay. I mean, it's not as good as Linda Hamilton and Michael Bihn's, but it's okay. It's different because she knows she's supposed to fall in love with Kyle Reese, but she she doesn't want that. She doesn't like the idea that her destiny is set, and that she has to fall in love and give birth to John. And she knows that Kyle dies. I mean, that's part of her hesitancy. Knowing that getting close to Kyle will result in his death. And certainly this is a film for the fans. I think if you go into this film not really knowing the Terminator films, you'll be lost. This isn't that kind of film that just makes it so newcomers can come in. I think even though we get exposition at the beginning and things are explained, it feels like you have to kind of know your stuff. And it is a, confusing film in a lot of ways. And maybe that's the thing. Like, once they start changing things, it's hard not for it to be complicated. And this movie is very expositional. It almost feels like there's too much explaining. While at the same time, not enough explaining for certain things. Particularly with John Connor, who gets killed, but is actually like turned into a Terminator, like a different kind of Terminator, and that's I think one of the most interesting new things they bring to it, is that John Connor becomes a machine. Except that I think they need to clarify how he ends up in 2017 because that's where Sarah and Kyle go to stop Judgment Day. Because Kyle's memories, he sees this little boy who is him, um, saying that Genisys is that Judgment Day happens on this date, and it's related to Genisys. And Genisys is this new, I forget how to describe, but it's like a new program. It's all kind of riffing on our obsession with, cell iPads, iPhones, our obsession with the new upgrade technology. So that's sort of their new kind of modern riff on the whole idea of Skynet. So yeah, they traveled to 2017. You don't know if John got there. Um, I guess it's through the time machine, or if he can travel freely through time, if that's what Skynet can do now. I don't know. That's, I think, the biggest plot hole. And John is also working with Miles and Danny Dyson from Terminator 2. And just I gotten Joe Morton back. I believe that's who played uh, Miles Dyson in the original uh, in Terminator 2. Because it would have made sense. He could have played an older Miles Dyson. Yeah, I think he's the right age. The timelines match for him still to be able to play it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why they recast him. Courtney B. Vance from Criminal Intent plays Miles. It's not a big it's not a big role. I wish they had a bit. The Dysons did have a bigger role. Because it feels like John the T-3000 working with them, ensuring Skynet's dominance. That needed to be clarified because it feels like that's sort of like the main um, sort of conflict, or not main conflict, but that's sort of like the central mission of the film for Skynet. So yeah, that stuff needed to be clarified. Um, yeah, and as I said, like when you're changing the timeline, I think you do. It's hard not to run into those problems. I want to talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger. I haven't talked about him yet. He's good here. He's actually giving a pretty understated performance. You would think, oh God, Arnold's playing the Terminator again. He's going to be embarrassing himself. But again, he's understated. He's not overdoing it. He has the "I'll be back" line, but other than that, yeah, it's a more low key kind of performance, and he is more of a supporting character here. Well, Terminator already always kind of is, but it's not like in Terminator 2. He has more of a clear kind of character arc. Um, Here it's more like in 3, where he really is kind of in the background in some ways. It's kind of between 2 and 3. He does have some character stuff here. I wish maybe they could have fleshed out even a little bit more, especially his relationship with Kyle Reese. He does have a really great emotional moment at the film's climax that I think is up there with the stuff from Terminator 2. Um, yeah, it's actually kind of a beautiful moment, and um, yeah, and I like how they explain how, okay, the skin ages, that's why he looks older, and I like how they make him being old a part of the character. It's not like in Terminator 3 where they kind of didn't say anything about it. It was just like, okay, he's a little bit chunkier, um, but we're not supposed to, think about it. No one mentions it that he's older, but here it's part of the character. He says, "I'm old, but not obsolete." Um, so there is a certain poignancy to it. Seeing, Arnold in this iconic role, but being, older. Yeah, and I like J.K. Simmons too in this film. Of course, I always like him. He plays this detective who met Kyle Reese back in 1984 when the T-1000 was attacking uh, him. And so he has all these kind of he meets the characters again in 2017. It's like you're the same people, and he has all these theories, and he sort of learns more about what's going on. Um, so that he's an interesting new element brought to the film because usually, you know, the exception of the core characters, not a lot of our characters are kind of brought into the fray, except for like Dr. Silverman, I guess, and the Dysons. But yeah, yeah. So J.K. Simmons is, he's always good. He's has some funny moments here. So yeah, he's good. My main problem going into the film, and still is that it all comes down to stopping Judgment Day. It's sort of become a running joke now in the franchise, I think. Stop Judgment Day in the second one, and the third one they try to stop it, but it's inevitable, and I don't know, it feels like that's been the plot of 3 out of 5 movies now. It was almost the plot of the first film, I think, or it was part of the plot in the first film, in deleted scenes, I believe. Um, I get that it's hard to kind of get out of that box. As much as they're changing things, they're still sort of playing in that same kind of box. And I don't know. I feel like maybe they should have tried to make the threat not necessarily Judgment Day in the exact same way. I think maybe I think I would have done it like like with John becoming a Terminator, that should have been the threat, like Skynet trying to turn other people into machines. I think that would have been an interesting thing to explore. And maybe they could do that in the second film because it's implied that even though they destroy Genisys, again, there's a mid-cred scene where it's like, okay, it's not really destroyed. Which again is a problem because then it's like, well, there's no real, is there really a purpose to it, to the story now? I mean, there is. Um, but yeah, so I would have may try to wish they would have tried something other than Judgment Day. Um, um, and one element I do really like is by the end, John is sort of kind of more out of the picture. They destroy. John's dead, but they destroy the T-3000. But it feels like, at the end, it's like, okay, you have a choice now. Kyle tells Sarah, you have a choice now. You don't have to be what they said you were going to be. And, John's usually the linchpin of this franchise. In the first one, it's like, you know, have to protect Sarah so John can be born. And second one, you have to protect John. And the third one, protecting John. The fourth one, it was about, um, you know, um, well, it was Skynet wanting to kill John Connor. I like how at the end of this, it's like, maybe John Connor won't be a thing. There is kind of a romance, still kind of a romance between Sarah and Kyle, but it's almost like, well, maybe Sarah doesn't want to be a mother, and maybe there's no need for a John Connor, and that's in some ways the most subversive element of the film is that basically it's like maybe there's no need for a John Connor. Um, may John, even though having giving birth to John wouldn't inherently be a bad thing, it's like, does that have to be the path now? And a woman deciding not to have a baby, that's kind of that's kind of progressive in a way. Um, um, there are some good character moments here between Kyle and Sarah. The motion doesn't always hit as hard, but like that there were small moments to breathe and um, I like this trio, like the Pops, Sarah, Kyle trio. I'm interested to see more of their interactions going forward. I don't. I think this film isn't performing that well, so I don't know. Maybe this will be another thing like Terminator Salvation, where we never really get a follow up to that. Um, they said, "Oh, well, Salvation is the beginning of a new trilogy." They said this was the beginning of a new trilogy. Um, I don't know. They may be rebooting again down the line. Um, so anyway, yeah, those are my overall thoughts. Oh, I want to say another thing. I want to say I think maybe this should have been the second film in a trilogy. I think it would have been great to get a first film about the Sarah Connor Pops relationship, and that could have been like the Terminator, and this could have been the Terminator 2. Maybe we could have um, made things a little bit more clear if they did two movies, and they could have may establish some things in the first film instead of like having it all crammed in this film. Because the film does feel kind of overcomplicated, and that maybe they should have. Again, it's very expositional, but I think they still should have tried to clarify some things, and may it could have been a longer film. Because it's actually kind of short. It's only about 2 hours 5 minutes with credits. So yeah, so in a way, yeah, so it's only about a 2 hour film, and I know some people will say, "Oh, this movie sucks. Why does it have to be even longer?" I think it would have been better if things were a little bit spaced out. But anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts. It's a little overcomplicated. Don't like them trying to prevent Judgment Day again. But I like a lot of the care. I like Amelia Clark and Arnold Schwarzenegger and even Jai Courtney. I like some of the character moments. I like what they did with John Connor, even though again I wanted some more of that fleshed out. I do think it's interesting that Sarah has to confront, killing her son, and there's this interesting moment. It's like when John wants to kill them, and they're like, "Well, you can't kill us because you'll never be born." And then it's like, "Well, maybe we exist out of time." And I think I do feel it should have gone into its themes a little bit more. Um, but I will say, go see it and make up your own mind, because I think it is an enjoyable film. Some will say it pisses on the legacy of the first two, but I don't think so. I think it retcons that stuff. You can still have those films. This is just, a different kind of take on it. Um, so yeah, it's a decent sci-fi action film. Yeah, so tell me if you've seen the film, what do you think? Um, where do you rank it among the Terminator films? Um, yeah, so comment below, let me know what you thought. So that's all for now. Bye.